Thank you to the founding sponsor of Undivided, 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com. Like many of you, I have been binge watching news coverage of the crisis in Ukraine. And like many of you, I've been struck by how different news coverage can be depending on who you watch. And I got to thinking, we do a lot of media criticism, media analysis on this show. And I thought it would be nice if every now and then when there's a major news story, we broke down how different media outlets covered it and the pros and the cons and the good and the bad of how they did so. So I am introducing a new segment called Who Covered It Best? So initially, my first media consumption of the crisis in Ukraine was right after President Biden addressed the world on the very latest, after Russia started to make its way into Ukraine. And I was watching CNN, and right before they go to the president, they have one of their CNN panels where it's like 7 people, and none of them are experts on Russia, Ukraine. They're all, anchors who I'm sure they know a little about a lot of things, but certainly aren't experts, and they're just sort of there talking to each other. And I was like, oh my God, I have to change the channel. So I wanted to look at how 4 different cable news networks covered what was happening in Ukraine. And I wanted to make sure it was sort of on an equal footing. And so the way I've gone about this analysis, I didn't want to pick opinion shows, because it's very clear that I'm going to get vastly different coverage if I'm talking about, Tucker Carlson versus maybe Joy Reid or someone. That doesn't make any sense. And so I wanted to pick what are supposed to be straightforward news programs, straightforward elements of cable news. And then I didn't want to pick, it wasn't fair because you have such a time difference between Ukraine and the United States. And so I wanted to pick newscasts that were at kind of a off kind of time of day, just so that I wasn't comparing, let's say, the BBC during prime time to some mid-afternoon newscast in the United States, or I wasn't comparing a primetime newscast in the United States to like middle of the night in Ukraine. And so here are the 4 newscasts that I ended up watching. I watched a half hour, so the exact same half hour of all of these in real time. So because I wanted to make sure they were covering the exact same developments in Ukraine and Russia with that conflict. So I watched CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and BBC World News. And again, all the newscasts that I chose are supposed to be straightforward newscasts. And I will say, by and large, they all were covering the same developments. They got the same stories in, hit all the big key points. Nobody had any scoops that the other network didn't have. So when it comes to the actual content that they were covering, it was very, very similar. And these were not opinion programs at all. And I was happy to see that, because they're not billed as opinion programs. And so you didn't have any of these hosts off giving their opinion about what was happening. But there were some key differences that I found very interesting. Now, we're going to stay on this graphic for a moment, and then we'll break down each one individually. But I broke this half-hour newscasts into 4 different categories. Scene reporting. So these are actual reports from the ground. So I considered that either in Russia or Ukraine or right along the border in a neighboring country. So I considered that reporting from the scene. And then I have a category called other reporting, which you see in yellow. And that is, say, the anchor on the desk who's giving an update from the newsroom, or maybe it's a reporter at the White House or in the United States, but they're not actually over there reporting from the conflict. I also have a segment there in blue for opinion and analysis. So these are guest segments. You have a guest on who is offering their expert analysis of the situation, or who is offering their opinion on the situation as a guest. And then you'll see I have a black segment, and that is for a commercial break, because you got to figure out how much time they're spending on commercial breaks. So a few things you'll notice off the bat, and we'll break this down in a moment, is there's a huge difference in the amount of on-scene reporting that these networks were offering at the time. And even though this was 1 p.m. Eastern time on a Saturday, there was still a lot going on, obviously, in Ukraine. And so, the fact that you would have reporting from the scene, that should be a major element of what they're bringing to viewers. So let's break these down individually to give you an idea of what I noticed. Starting with CNN, I watched CNN Newsroom with Frederica Whitfield. And let's go through what this half hour brought to us. Again, the same developments. All these networks had the same developments, talking about the latest with SWIFT, the latest on the ground in Ukraine, talking about countries that had just announced they were going to supply weapons to Ukraine. Not a lot of difference in the actual stories. But so CNN in 30 minutes only had 7 minutes of reporting from the ground in Ukraine or Russia or along a border. Only 7 minutes. And I will say also, it really wasn't all that compelling of reporting on the ground. And I thought 7 minutes, it seemed very light to me. Now, there were 7 minutes of other reporting. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that it's not actively on the scene telling you what's happening from the crisis. A lot of that was Frederica Whitfield just updating the audience. There was also reports from elsewhere. Now, opinion analysis, 7 minutes, 30 seconds. So you have a really even split between scene reporting, other reporting, and opinion and analysis. That's really not a bad thing. You know, you have a little bit of diversity in there. You're getting information from the ground, but also, you know, analysis can be really good in helping you understand complex situations. Now, here's where I really struggled with CNN. 8 minutes and 30 seconds of commercial breaks. In a half an hour, 8 minutes and 30 seconds of commercial breaks. That black piece of the pie makes up the biggest piece of the pie out of everything. They had more commercial breaks on CNN in that half hour than anything else during a breaking news segment. So let's move to the next one. Fox News, America Reports with John Roberts and Sandra Smith. Check out that green slice of the pie, 14 minutes of reporting from the scene. Now, that could be, 14 minutes doesn't mean a lot if the reporting is not good, but I found the reporting very compelling. Trey Yingst has been reporting, and he was doing sort of a very stationary report, but then playing some of his reporting from earlier in the day. You see him out there around rubble. And so they had 14 minutes of really compelling reporting from the scene. Now, they had other reporting, just 7 minutes, where they were doing other updates. The anchors, Sandra Smith and John Roberts, were doing updates from the anchor desk. And they had 6 minutes of opinion and analysis. They had on an expert on Russia, and I actually thought he was really, really compelling and a lot of good information. So not a ton of opinion and analysis, but it was good analysis that was very informative. And check this out, 3 minutes. 3 minutes during this half hour of Fox News. That's all the commercial breaks they had. They had one at the very end of the half hour. So after I just watched CNN, I was like, Fox News was able to fit in so much more content and more compelling scene reporting than CNN. Okay, let's go to the next one. MSNBC, Alex Witt reports. Now, I'd never watched Alex Witt before. I will say I think she's a very good straight news anchor. I really thought she was very effective and to the point. You'll see a pretty even split here with MSNBC between reporting from the scene and other reporting, but their scene reporting was really blah. It was just sort of a reporter standing there, not really relaying a lot of really compelling storytelling. And also, and I'll get to this more in a moment, there were several instances of their reporters passing along information that the reporter acknowledged wasn't verified, which to me, in a crisis situation that's very complex and highly volatile, there's no need to be passing along information to viewers across the world that you have not verified. And I was very taken aback by that. The reporting in this half hour felt very lazy to me. And then there was 9 minutes, 50 seconds of opinion/analysis. There was a guest on who was in Ukraine, Ukrainian, and Alex Witt had a really hard time cutting him off. And so it was way too much analysis. Might have been good to have this guy on for 2-3 minutes, but he was on for way too long. And so you see the biggest chunk of this MSNBC half hour that is supposed to be straight news was opinion analysis. And then you had a 4-minute commercial break. So pretty in line with Fox News. Okay, last but not least, the BBC. BBC World News with Ben Brown. I will say Ben Brown was sort of a character. It was a little bit, how do I put this? BBC is just different. And I mean, we're used to American news, so it's can be a little cornier maybe, but enjoyed watching it. But check this out. The only 2 elements in this half hour for BBC World News was reporting from the scene all along Ukraine, in Russia. They had folks everywhere. And then other reporting, and most of that was obviously Ben Brown there on the set, relaying updates to viewers. No opinion and analysis in this half hour, and no commercials. Now, BBC is a government entity, essentially, so I'm not going to blame cable news in America for having to have more commercials than the BBC, but I found this fascinating. This was BBC incredibly compelling coverage from the ground, and it's understandable because they have reporters who, they're in London, and so they're going to have more reporters who are based in Europe, who are experts on Europe, and so they had so much really compelling content on the ground, telling the stories of Ukrainians, those who are fighting, telling the stories of Russians. And it was really, really just, I guess, wonderful to watch. And I feel like I learned so much from watching just a half hour of BBC News. So I want to take you into how I rated these 4 news outlets on their coverage of the Ukraine crisis in the same half hour. Number 1, BBC News. This was, to me, hands down. There was no frills, very straightforward coverage, and the reports were very vivid. I really felt like I understood the emotions of the situation. And I'm approaching these ratings from, if I'm just an average American who wants to know what the heck is happening in Ukraine and just turns on the TV, am I going to feel like I come away with enough information and understanding of the situation? So to me, BBC World News, and perhaps it's because they are closer to the crisis, they just covered the crisis so much better. I will say, as far as American cable news, Fox was very close to BBC. They had a really good mix of everything, of field reporting, other reporting, the anchors getting involved. I thought the anchors were great. And they had really useful analysis that helped me better understand the implications and the situation. So Fox News, a very close second. I had a hard time between CNN and MSNBC. CNN, as I said, they had so much commercial time in a half hour. So you'd think, well, if a third of the entire show was commercials, then how can they beat MSNBC? CNN was completely disjointed to me. It seemed like they didn't really have a plan for their coverage. It wasn't very meaningful coverage. And so that, combined with the commercials, put them at number 3. MSNBC, I thought, was last. This was actually, I will say, a pretty easy decision when I really weighed it, and that's because they were putting out half-baked info. You cannot have your reporters in a crisis who are saying, oh, I've seen reports of this, but it's not confirmed. And it's lazy and it's really irresponsible. And so just the fact, even though CNN had, 5+ minutes more of commercial time, MSNBC to me had some really irresponsible reporting in that period of time. And they didn't have any vivid storytelling at all during that period where I really felt as if I understood the emotions of the situation. I just didn't see that. I will say I like Alex Witt. I think she's a good host. She is not the reason that MSNBC was number 4 in this half hour in my sort of analysis of things. But, when you're putting out half-baked information, I'm sorry, but that is just not what we expect of a major news organization. So I hope that was helpful to you. I plan on doing this a little bit more often. It's always good to take a really critical look at how the news is doing news and is it serving viewers. And again, you could have watched, CNN or MSNBC at a totally different time of day and their coverage might have been much better than BBC or Fox. But I looked at 1 half hour, tried to pick a half hour that I thought was fair. And you'll see, and I'll go back to that one slide. You can see that there really is a pretty significant difference in how they are spending a half hour of your time informing you of a situation. I will say all 4 of them did not get off the Ukraine subject. They were on it for the entire half hour. It just varied in how they chose to bring that story to viewers. So for today, in our new segment, Who Covered It Best? The winner is going to be BBC World News. And I've actually found their coverage throughout this whole crisis very good. And again, I think it's because they're closer to the crisis. They have more reporters who are experts on that issue. So if you're looking for who to watch for straight coverage of Ukraine, I do recommend BBC World News. If you want someone's opinion, don't go with BBC World News. But if you're looking for straight coverage, that's a really good bet. We're going to do this segment more often, by the way. I'm thinking with some local newscasts as well, and then some coverage of domestic issues. When a big story domestically breaks, we're going to do a little breakdown of how it's being covered in the press. A big thank you to the founding sponsor of Undivided, 1530 Mortgage, a company that had my back when I left corporate media and said, hey, we'll sponsor your new show. We love what you're doing. We support what you're doing. And these are just good people. This is a great company, 1530 Mortgages, dedicated to just getting you into your dream home as quickly as possible. And so that means either if you want a new home and you're looking for a new home loan, or perhaps you're looking to refinance, to do a remodel of your existing home, to make it your dream home, I'm telling you, check out 1530 Mortgage, 1530mortgage.com. And I am so confident that you can trust them with your adventure to homeownership and more. If you like segments like this, consider becoming an undivided subscriber on my Patreon page, patreon.com/undivided, or by becoming a contributor on my Locals community, brandycruz.locals.com. Come be part of this movement to give common sense a comeback.